Aging is often treated as an unstoppable force, a calendar-driven decline that happens to everyone at roughly the same pace. Yet when we look closely at human biology, that explanation collapses. Time passes equally for all of us, but bodies respond very differently to it. What separates rapid aging from slow aging is not the clock, but the instructions the body receives day after day. Cells do not know how old you are. They only know what signals they are exposed to, repeatedly and without interruption. Every biological system operates on feedback. Muscles grow or shrink depending on demand. Bones strengthen or thin based on load. The skin repairs or deteriorates depending on nutrient availability and inflammation. Aging emerges when the dominant signals tell the body that repair is no longer worth the energy. This shift does not happen overnight. It happens quietly, through thousands of small decisions that accumulate into a long-term message about whether the body should invest in maintenance or begin controlled decline. Food is one of the most powerful instruction sets we deliver. Not in the simplistic sense of calories, but in molecular language. Every meal informs hormone production, mitochondrial efficiency, immune activity, and tissue turnover. When nutrients arrive in forms the body can easily use, cells interpret abundance as a reason to stay robust. When food repeatedly causes stress, instability, or deficiency, the message changes. The body becomes conservative. It prioritizes survival over renewal, which outwardly appears as aging. This perspective reframes aging from an enemy into a consequence. Wrinkles, muscle loss, joint stiffness, and fatigue are not random failures. They are expressions of long-term instruction. The body does exactly what it is trained to do. If it is trained to expect inflammation, nutrient scarcity, or metabolic chaos, it adapts accordingly. If it is trained to expect consistency, density, and calm, it resists breakdown with remarkable efficiency. One of the most overlooked aspects of aging is that the body is always choosing where to spend energy. Repair is expensive. Maintaining muscle protein, collagen structure, and mitochondrial quality requires resources. When the body senses instability, it reallocates energy away from long-term maintenance toward short-term defense. This trade-off is invisible day to day, but obvious over decades. People who age slowly are not defying biology. They are signaling that repair remains a worthwhile investment. Stress accelerates aging not because it feels unpleasant, but because it alters instruction. Chronic stress tells the body that danger is persistent. Hormones shift, inflammation rises, digestion weakens, and repair slows. The same principle applies to dietary stress. Frequent blood sugar swings, nutrient-poor foods, and digestive irritation all signal unpredictability. The body responds by tightening systems, conserving resources, and lowering the priority of renewal. Understanding aging as instruction also restores a sense of agency. This is not about perfection or control, but about awareness. Small changes repeated over long periods reshape the biological narrative. The body does not require dramatic intervention. It requires consistent reassurance that the environment is safe enough to maintain itself. This reassurance arrives through stable energy, sufficient nutrients, and reduced inflammatory noise. When someone appears decades younger than their peers, what we are witnessing is not magic or denial of time. We are seeing a body that never received the message to fall apart. Its systems were told, repeatedly, that strength was still required, repair was still supported, and decay was unnecessary. Aging, in this light, is not a fixed destiny, but a reflection of what the body has been taught to believe about the future. Protein-dense, nutrient-rich foods do far more than satisfy hunger or support muscle in a visible way. They act as structural signals, informing the body whether it should continue building, repairing, and reinforcing itself or begin quietly dismantling what it already has. At the cellular level, the body is constantly weighing this decision. Proteins are not just fuel, they are raw material, instruction, and permission. When they arrive consistently and in usable forms, tissues interpret that as a reason to stay intact. Every cell is made primarily of protein, and those proteins are in a constant state of turnover. Muscle fibers, enzymes, receptors, antibodies, skin, connective tissue, even neurotransmitters all depend on a steady supply of amino acids. When this supply is inconsistent or diluted, the body adapts by becoming economical. It slows renewal. It prioritizes essential survival functions and delays cosmetic or structural maintenance. Over time, this economy looks like aging, even though the underlying mechanism is simply reduced rebuilding. High-quality protein sends a different message. It tells the body that resources are available to justify repair. Muscle protein synthesis increases, not only preserving strength but maintaining metabolic activity. Muscle is not merely for movement, it is a reservoir of amino acids, a regulator of blood sugar, and a stabilizer of hormones. When muscle is preserved, the entire system benefits. Skin remains thicker, bones stay denser, posture improves, and insulin sensitivity remains higher, all of which contribute to a younger biological profile. Nutrient density amplifies this effect. Protein alone is not enough if it arrives without vitamins, minerals, and fats that allow it to be used properly. Zinc, magnesium, B vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins, and cholesterol all participate in protein utilization and tissue repair. When foods deliver these elements together, the body works efficiently. Digestion improves, inflammation decreases, and fewer resources are wasted compensating for deficiencies. Efficiency is youth at the cellular level. One reason protein-dense diets often correlate with slower aging is hormonal signaling. Adequate protein supports growth factors that maintain lean tissue and connective strength. These signals decline rapidly when protein intake drops, even if calorie intake remains high. The body reads this as a warning that structural investment is no longer safe. Muscle loss accelerates, skin thins, and recovery slows. None of this is dramatic in the short term, but it becomes unmistakable over years. There is also a neurological component. Amino acids are precursors to neurotransmitters that regulate motivation, mood, and focus. When these systems function well, movement increases naturally, stress resilience improves, and sleep quality rises. These indirect effects further protect tissues from breakdown. Aging is not isolated to one system. It emerges when multiple systems receive the same low-quality instruction. Protein-dense foods also tend to reduce dietary noise. When meals are centered around structure rather than stimulation, blood sugar remains more stable and appetite becomes more predictable. This stability reduces inflammatory signaling and lowers cortisol exposure. The body shifts from a reactive state to a maintenance state. In that environment, repair becomes the default rather than the exception. What appears on the surface as dietary simplicity is, underneath, a sophisticated form of biological communication. Repeatedly providing the body with the materials it needs to rebuild itself tells every system that decay is not required yet. The skin holds its thickness, muscles retain their density, joints stay supported, and metabolism remains steady. Aging slows not because time is resisted, but because the body is never instructed to abandon its structure. Metabolic calm is one of the most underestimated forces in aging. The body does not age fastest when energy is low, but when energy is chaotic. Rapid swings in blood sugar create a biochemical environment that quietly accelerates wear on nearly every tissue. Each spike followed by a crash forces cells to adapt under pressure, increasing oxidative stress and disrupting normal signaling. Over time, this instability becomes a dominant instruction, telling the body that the environment is unpredictable and that long-term investment is risky. When glucose rises sharply, proteins throughout the body become more vulnerable to damage. Sugars bind to them in a process that stiffens tissues and reduces function. Collagen loses elasticity, enzymes lose precision, and blood vessels lose their ability to respond smoothly. This damage does not announce itself immediately. It accumulates invisibly, layer by layer, until aging becomes obvious. Metabolic calm prevents this process not by eliminating carbohydrates entirely, but by controlling how quickly and how often glucose enters the bloodstream. Stable energy allows mitochondria to function efficiently. These organelles produce power for every cellular process, including repair. When fuel arrives gradually, mitochondria generate energy with less waste. When fuel arrives in floods, they leak reactive byproducts that damage surrounding structures. Over decades, this difference in efficiency determines whether cells remain functional or gradually decline. Youth at the cellular level is not about abundance, but about order. Insulin signaling plays a central role in this process. Frequent spikes force insulin to work harder, eventually dulling its effectiveness. Cells become less responsive, requiring higher levels to manage the same amount of glucose. This resistance creates a cascade of consequences, including increased inflammation and altered hormone balance. Metabolic calm preserves insulin sensitivity, allowing the body to regulate energy with minimal strain. When insulin functions well, tissues receive what they need without being overwhelmed. The brain is particularly sensitive to metabolic instability. Fluctuating blood sugar disrupts concentration, mood, and sleep, all of which influence aging indirectly. Poor sleep increases inflammatory signaling and impairs tissue repair. Mood instability raises stress hormones that constrict blood vessels and accelerate breakdown. Stable energy supports neurological consistency, which reinforces healthy behavior and movement patterns. The benefits compound quietly. Metabolic calm also reduces the burden on the liver and digestive system. When energy intake is steady, these organs process nutrients efficiently without emergency responses. Detoxification pathways remain balanced, and inflammatory markers stay lower. The body spends less time correcting errors and more time maintaining structure. Aging slows not because damage stops, but because repair keeps pace. One of the most important insights is that metabolic calm feels ordinary. It lacks the drama of stimulants or crashes. This ordinariness is precisely why it protects youth. Cells prefer predictability. They evolved in environments where food intake was irregular but rarely excessive in speed or concentration. Modern diets overwhelm systems designed for gradual input. Restoring calm aligns metabolism with its original design. When energy remains stable, hormones communicate clearly, tissues respond appropriately, and repair mechanisms stay active. The face retains its fullness, muscles keep their tone, and joints maintain lubrication. These are not cosmetic effects, but reflections of underlying order. Aging accelerates when the body is forced into constant adjustment. It slows when energy arrives in a way the body can trust, allowing systems to remain coordinated rather than reactive. Hormonal honesty begins with understanding that the body does not create hormones out of intention, but out of available materials. Testosterone, thyroid hormones, cortisol, and growth factors are not abstract forces. They are physical substances assembled from cholesterol, amino acids, minerals, and fats. When these raw materials are consistently present, hormone production remains steady and proportionate. When they are missing or replaced with poor substitutes, the endocrine system compensates by lowering output or distorting balance, and this distortion accelerates aging long before symptoms are recognized. Cholesterol has been misunderstood as something to suppress rather than something to use wisely. It is not merely a passenger in the bloodstream but a foundational molecule from which key hormones are built. When cholesterol intake and utilization are adequate, the body can maintain testosterone levels that preserve muscle density, bone strength, and tissue thickness. These traits are often mistaken for aesthetics, yet they are deeply functional markers of youth. Strength protects joints, density prevents frailty, and structure maintains metabolic stability. Thyroid function offers another example of hormonal honesty. The thyroid governs metabolic tempo, influencing how quickly cells produce energy and how efficiently they repair themselves. Without sufficient nutrients such as iodine, selenium, and adequate protein, thyroid signaling weakens. Metabolism slows not as a failure, but as a protective response. The body reduces output when it senses that fuel quality cannot support higher activity. This slowdown conserves resources but also reduces renewal, making aging appear inevitable when it is actually adaptive. Growth factors respond similarly. They are not driven by age, but by signal clarity. When protein intake is sufficient and energy remains stable, growth signaling supports muscle maintenance, collagen production, and tissue repair. When inputs are inconsistent, the body reduces growth signaling to avoid building structures it cannot maintain. Over time, this reduction manifests as thinning skin, slower recovery, and loss of resilience. What looks like decline is often restraint. Hormonal systems are exquisitely sensitive to stress, both psychological and nutritional. When the body is underfed or overstimulated, cortisol rises to mobilize energy. Short-term cortisol is useful, but chronic elevation suppresses testosterone and growth signaling while increasing inflammation. Foods that provide adequate fats, minerals, and protein lower the need for constant stress compensation. Hormonal honesty emerges when the body no longer needs to improvise under pressure. There is also a feedback loop between hormones and movement. Adequate testosterone and thyroid activity encourage physical activity by improving energy and confidence of motion. Movement, in turn, reinforces hormonal balance. This loop deteriorates when nutrition fails to support hormone production. Fatigue increases, activity decreases, and the body interprets inactivity as a signal to further down-regulate hormones. Aging accelerates not because the body wants to decline, but because the signals have become internally consistent in the wrong direction. What makes this principle powerful is its simplicity. Hormones do not demand novelty or excess. They require reliability. When the body receives the same supportive materials regularly, endocrine rhythms stabilize. Mood becomes steadier, sleep deepens, and tissue repair improves. These changes are not dramatic, but they are cumulative. Over years, they create a body that maintains strength, posture, and presence beyond expected timelines. Hormonal honesty is not about forcing youth through stimulation or suppression. It is about allowing the body to express its natural design by removing obstacles and providing essentials. When hormones are built from proper materials, they do not overshoot or collapse. They simply do their work, preserving function quietly and persistently, allowing age to pass without demanding that the body surrender to it. Simplicity and consistency are rarely celebrated in discussions about health, yet the human body responds to them with remarkable gratitude. Beneath the surface of digestion, immunity, and metabolism, the body is constantly assessing its environment for predictability. When inputs are chaotic, the body prepares for threat. When inputs are steady, it relaxes into maintenance. Eating a small number of familiar, digestible foods repeatedly creates a biological atmosphere of safety, and that atmosphere directly influences how quickly the body ages. The digestive system is one of the first places this effect becomes visible. Every new or complex food requires enzymatic adjustment, immune assessment, and microbial negotiation. Occasional novelty is not harmful, but constant variation forces the gut into a state of vigilance. Over time, this vigilance increases permeability and immune activation. Inflammation rises quietly, not as an illness, but as a background condition. When food choices are simple and repeated, digestion becomes efficient. Enzyme production stabilizes, gut lining integrity improves, and immune activity calms. A calm gut sends fewer distress signals to the rest of the body. Inflammation is not inherently bad. It is a repair mechanism. But when it becomes chronic, it accelerates aging across every tissue. Skin loses clarity, joints stiffen, blood vessels harden, and the brain becomes more reactive. Simplicity reduces the triggers that keep inflammation switched on. Fewer irritants, fewer metabolic surprises, fewer immune alarms. The body conserves energy that would otherwise be spent on defense and redirects it toward repair. Consistency also eases the burden on the nervous system. Decision-making itself is a form of stress. When food choices are endlessly varied, the brain remains engaged in evaluation and anticipation. This cognitive load influences hormonal output, subtly increasing cortisol and sympathetic tone. Repetition removes this strain. The nervous system learns what to expect, digestion synchronizes with circadian rhythms, and hormonal fluctuations smooth out. Calm at the level of choice becomes calm at the level of chemistry. There is a metabolic advantage to repetition as well. When the body regularly receives the same foods, nutrient absorption improves. Transporters upregulate, enzymes become more efficient, and fewer nutrients are wasted. This efficiency reduces the need for compensatory eating and stabilizes appetite. Blood sugar becomes more predictable, energy steadier. These effects ripple outward, protecting blood vessels, preserving muscle, and supporting brain function. Simplicity also supports identity, which plays a quiet but powerful role in aging. When eating patterns are clear and habitual, they require less willpower. Willpower depletion often leads to cycles of restriction and excess, both of which stress the body. Stable habits remove this oscillation. The body thrives in environments where extremes are rare. Aging accelerates when systems are repeatedly pushed and pulled. It slows when rhythms are gentle and reliable. Another overlooked benefit is resilience during disruption. Illness, travel, stress, or aging itself can temporarily reduce digestive or metabolic capacity. A simple dietary pattern makes it easier to return to baseline. The body remembers what works. Complex systems take longer to reboot. Over decades, This resilience preserves function when others experience cascading decline. What appears externally as monotony is internally experienced as relief. The body does not crave novelty the way the mind does. It craves clarity. When inputs are consistent, biological processes align. Immune surveillance quiets. Repair mechanisms operate without interruption. Energy is no longer diverted toward constant adaptation. Aging, which thrives on chronic disturbance, loses its momentum. Simplicity is not deprivation. It is precision. It is the decision to remove unnecessary noise so the body can hear itself clearly. When food becomes predictable and supportive, the body responds with trust. That trust allows systems to remain open, flexible, and responsive over time. Youthfulness, in this sense, is not preserved by excitement, but by the quiet confidence that tomorrow will look much like today, and that today is already safe enough to maintain what matters.